Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it is a absolutely wild week for anyone in and around government, but especially caseworkers, as you guys are handling shutdown prep and the usual run of casework and hurricane prep and just so many things. So, as always, we are so grateful to you for spending your time with us for a little while today for this next event in our Casework Navigator webinar series. So welcome back, everyone, if you've joined us before. If you haven't, I'm Meeker. I'm Managing Director for POPVOX Foundation, a former caseworker, former Director of Constituent Services. And today is the third. Is this the third? The fourth. Okay, amazing. In our series of casework webinars focused on helping you understand and anticipate changes to federal agency programs and prepare for how these changes may impact your caseloads, may already be impacting your caseloads in terms of constituent demand, potential program challenges, and the process for actually handling cases within these federal agencies. So the inspiration for this series obviously came out specifically of those super chaotic months early this year when we were getting reports about big programmatic cuts to agency liaison teams. And I know offices on both sides of the aisle were really struggling to figure out what do those mean for me? What do those mean for us in terms of casework? So around that time, I had the incredible good fortune to be connected to Dana Chisnell, our partner and co-host for this series. So Dana was the first head of customer experience for the Department of Homeland Security and was part of the founding cohort of U.S. digital service focused on immigration. So she's now at Bloomworks, a women-owned digital services company that believes better government services start with putting people first. Incredible, from one lady-operated organization to another. We're just here for it. This is incredible. So this series has focused, as we said, on bringing former agency staff together with civil service organizations and experts working on related issue areas to break all of that down. How are agencies' digital services put together? How are they changing? How are they changing with regard to all of the program changes we've seen this year? And then again, what does that mean for casework? So we're really not just getting at the what of casework, what are you hearing, but we're getting at the why, what's happening behind the scenes within agencies that impacts your constituents' experience and also impacts your ability to get answers. So one thing that I keep hearing from caseworkers in this last year is that kind of the gray area bucket of casework that may not look like traditional casework in the past has been growing almost exponentially for some offices. So instead of just their standard, this is an agency within federal jurisdiction, there is a problem with a program or service that agency offers. These might be some of the cases that are a little bit more tangential. And today, in particular, we are focusing on consumer complaints and federal agencies with jurisdiction over those consumer complaints. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the surprisingly vast landscape of other federal and state level agencies who can receive and act on these consumer complaints about safety, fraud, shady business practices, unfair dealings, and all of the above. So we are so delighted to have our speaker today, Erie Meyer. Dana, I will kick it over to you to give Erie the introduction she deserves.
Thank you so much, Anne. I am excited about this series because I think that the more that congressional staff know about how public digital services work, how they're delivered by the federal government, the better we can all support constituents. So I'm delighted today to introduce Erie Meyer. Erie is a nationally recognized leader at the intersection of technology, public policy, and consumer protection. Over the last decade, she has kick some butt on all kinds of shaping of federal government digital services, how it builds and regulates technology, always with the focus on protecting people and making public services work better. Erie was a founding member of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, where she helped launch its tech and innovation team to bring modern practices to consumer finance oversight. She was also the first person hired into the U.S. Digital Service, the startup that was inside the federal government dedicated to improving critical public-facing systems. Her career has spanned nonprofit leadership at Code for America, where she advanced digital equity in state and local programs, and senior roles in federal agencies tackling the hardest challenges in privacy, data protection, and emerging technologies. Most recently, Erie served as the chief technologist at both the Federal Trade Commission and then the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, advising agency leadership on technology trends, artificial intelligence, and data security. Today, she is a senior fellow at Vanderbilt University's Policy Accelerator and collaborates with Georgetown Law Institute for Technology and Law and Georgetown Law's Institute for Technology, Law, and Policy. Sheesh. Please join me in welcoming Erie. And back to you.
Say it's hard to keep all of the words straight when you are wearing so many incredible hats at so many wonderful organizations. So
all the nouns, put them in any order they work.
All the good nouns, all the exciting nouns.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Dana, thank you. And Erie, thank you again so much for being here. We're really excited to hear about many pieces of your long career in federal service. So I would love to just start with your background because you have worked in, as we've said, the digital infrastructure for multiple agencies that handle consumer complaints. So how did this end up as your specialty?
So first of all, thank you so much for this series. As somebody who has availed myself of casework, cares about caseworkers, and ideally sets up systems to work well for you all. It's a dream that this exists. And thank you to all for being here, and I'm at your disposal. So I was minding my own business, and this time I swear it is the case. And my dad actually worked in the Ohio legislature for 33 years, and among his duties was casework. And so I remember going to his office and listening to him talk to people from his district, really trying to get to the bottom of tough problems they were facing, and it made a big impression on me. The first consumer complaint system I got to work on was the Ohio Attorney General's office. At the time, it was all paper. So we digitized the form and spent a lot of time talking to complainants about their experience of consumer issues. And this is during the financial crisis. It was very mortgage oriented. Then when the CFPB was being launched, I had the honor of helping design and stand up their consumer complaint system because I'd had the mortgage heavy Ohio experience. And at both of these different agencies, I got to use the Federal Trade Commission's Sentinel database of consumer complaints from all around the country, and later got to work at the Federal Trade Commission and avail myself of all the insights in Sentinel. Nothing is more meaningful when you're trying to do a great job as the government as hearing directly from people who are having a hard time. So I've been in the tank since I was a little kid, and I'm so excited to still be involved.
Amazing. And I will say, as an Ohioan, I've also personally benefited from your work on multiple levels now. So it's always great to see Ohio just running the show here. Wonderful. So talking to offices, I think this is one of the areas of casework where, just in my experience, my limited perspective, we see some of the most variation between how offices handle these types of cases, these consumer protection cases, which offices will take them, which offices won't take them, which offices will refer, where do they refer to? It just seems like kind of a landscape where there's not a lot of consistency between offices. And I think a lot of that comes from a really valid place where offices are concerned about an overreach of congressional authority. But again, you've kind of spent your career working with government agencies that are set up to manage these complaints that are perfectly within jurisdiction for congressional offices. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the role those complaints play for federal agencies overall. How are they set up? Why are they set up? What is the value of receiving those complaints for federal agencies?
So what's interesting is even if Congress is a little nervous about running down each individual consumer complaint, it was the foresight of Congress that created these systems. So during the financial crisis, when constituents were calling their member of Congress and saying, can you make my bank respond to me in a timely way? Or somebody lost my foreclosure or loan modification paperwork 10 times. Can you get them to give it back to me? Congress got together and said, like, let's just have a single place for people to go to get direct help. So our complaint system was designed to be that place, and it covers mortgages, student loans, debt collection, but also things like video game currency. It's a $57 billion a year industry, and parents especially are overwhelmed with weird charges on Roblox and are kind of like, what now? Our agency, the basic version of how we're set up to handle these is we have a team that has 10 years of expertise in getting these complaints in quickly, getting a response from the company quickly to the consumer, and then being able to use that information both as public data for Congress or other places to use, but also really as intel about the market at large. So we see they see both the individual complaints as really important to get that individual assistance and communication directly to people, but also to have that sort of high level intel about what the whole market is doing.
So how does this work on the back end? How is CFPB actually set up to handle complaints? When somebody submits a complaint, what happens?
So the system, for context, CFPB is a little bit younger than Pinterest. So when you hear about legacy systems and things taking a long time and horrible backlogs, we are very lucky that that is not the CFPB. So when we were building the system, we were able to take advantage of a lot of the automation and modern frameworks that, again, like Pinterest and others also got to take advantage of. So here's how it works. A consumer complains, and they can complain, of course, on paper. They can complain via fax. They can call into our call center. It takes 188 languages, 8 a.m. Monday through Friday, Eastern Time. They can complain to a congressional office, and I know you all have a system to input your complaints, or the very fastest thing they can do is complain directly on our website. What happens immediately upon submission of that complaint is that it's sent to the company that is named in the complaint. So for example, the most common complaints are, you won't be surprised, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. But let's choose something like, not that company. We'll use JP Morgan Chase, right? Like, let's say somebody complains about JP Morgan Chase. The first step is we say, hey, JP Morgan Chase, is this complainant, Dana Chisnell, actually your customer? Is this sort of like a fly-by-night person who's having a weird day, or is this actually your customer? If JP Morgan Chase says, yep, Dana's ours, then we're like, great, please respond to her. If they say no, she's not, you're sort of kicked into another flow, which is too complicated for right now. That all happens in an automated way. As soon as JP Morgan Chase gets that complaint from Dana in our system, they're able to say, hey, what happened? Let's figure out what's going on. Consumers report getting sort of like a executive customer service level of support. And sometimes they really just want an explanation. Sometimes they do need money back. But a human is finally answering them and giving them a straight answer because they know the government will be watching carefully on how that goes. So JP Morgan Chase has at most 14 days to respond. They could say this is extremely complicated, it's about our mortgage, and ask for an additional 60 days. That is infrequent. We find that the complaints are typically sent and then responded to in less than 5 days. Then after that complaint is resolved, we go back to Dana and we say, hey, is there anything we should know about this process? So she could say something went wrong or something is of concern or you should take another look. And then we publish the complaint data. We hear overwhelming rates of people having a straightforward and simple experience with the complaint system. If you're curious about what that looks like for you, you can look up your state or your jurisdiction in your dashboard and see what some of your constituents are complaining about already. Or what I like to do is even look on Reddit and people talking about the CFPB complaint system. And they'll say, I'm a service member, I couldn't get a straight answer. And then in 24 hours, they fixed it when I finally finished a complaint. So most of it is automated because we were built, again, like younger than Pinterest. But manual parts are around if there isn't a company really named, if something happens where the company says, no, that's not our person. If the referral is coming from Congress, we have a person just double check. And right now, all of those people are at work. And complaints are moving really, really quickly. And again, that data is public. I'll see if I can put the link in the chat so you can see that they're sort of flying through. And in fact, the number of complaints is sort of hockey sticking. Unfortunately, I'm sure you're all seeing that in the calls you're receiving in your offices as well, that some folks are having a really hard time.
Yeah. So given the scale of the complaints, how does the agency, how does CFPB pull trends and flags out of the data? And what can caseworkers see about what the trends are, what the work looks like?
Yeah. So a member of the public with only, Beyonce's internet access could see actually quite a bit. We publish our complaint narratives where a person actually describes what's going on. That is, I think, particularly helpful for policymakers, even because I was at a convening last week with a bunch of AGs, bipartisan AG staffers who were trying to figure out issues around AI. We pulled up the complaint database and were able to find a huge number of AI complaints. They're not, you all know, there's not like a category called AI complaint. But because those narratives are included, you're able to do either automated natural language processing or really manual searching the word human, person, robot, and to see seniors in all caps saying, like, I want to talk to a human. One of the spikes we're seeing right now in the data is people with Best Buy credit cards that go through Citibank. A ton of people do not like whatever just happened to the change in their customer service system and are reporting chatbot doom loop. So you can really catch those emerging trends, which is nice. Our teams, there are a subset that are always prioritized, Monday through Friday and beyond, which are things like imminent foreclosure. So, for example, if one of your constituents says, something is very wrong, someone is here to foreclose on our house right now, help me. We don't even wait the normal cycle. There is an escalation path where humans immediately work on that complaint. We also have some safety infrastructure. If someone, some of this is, I only say the public parts, but if someone describes a threat or self-harm, we have another urgent response process in place ready to handle those things, and refer folks to law enforcement as appropriate. And then we also look for what's happening in the market, like this explosion of scams, folks being confused about, is this legitimate or not? A lot of problems on legitimate platforms like Zelle or Cash App or any of these money sending platforms. You'll get complaints about different types of companies, but then you'll go through and say, like, wait a second, this is the same language using the same prompt on these same platforms. And then working backwards, we can send investigators to try and address the larger issue at play. But complaints are really the lifeblood to inform that body of work.
So are there things that are trending that offices should actively encourage their constituents to pay attention to and to report?
Yeah, I think this is not like, where will this recording be posted before I say what I'm about to say? Just to the caseworkers or to on
This is a public recording.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I would definitely encourage people to file complaints. One of the reasons why is there's a much higher chance of getting your money back. Meaning, if a consumer has had a problem with one of the companies that's in our remit, their remit, there are recovery scams that can try and take the constituents to another path. There are, frankly, some customer service structures that sort of send people to loop. It's particularly frustrating for seniors. We see that quite a bit. So getting them into our complaint system, if they haven't been able to get assistance, we see is extremely meaningful, just to make sure the person has gotten to the right place, the right team inside the firm to get them an answer that the firm is comfortable with regulators seeing. And if it's appropriate for that person to get a refund, people report that this is one of the only ways that they are able to get a refund if funds are missing from their account. Hopefully there are more, but if I were you, I would be sending my constituents through the system. And folks, many congressional offices are to this day.
Yeah, so let's talk about going to the right place at the right time. I've heard that a good part of CFPB's legislative staff time is spent helping caseworkers sort of figure out what the right agency is to direct somebody to for their complaint. Do you have any tips or advice that you can share?
Yeah, I would say that I'll just say, like, as a person, the number one most important thing when I'm choosing where to send a friend who's having a hard time is, are they going to get an answer? And I worked at the Federal Trade Commission. I love the Federal Trade Commission. You don't even get a confirmation email that says, like, thanks for your complaint from the Federal Trade Commission. So Anne just popped in there sort of my flow chart, but my sort of like cheat version of it is, if it has anything to do with money, start with the CFPB. Just because our system is automated, people get an individual response. People are often very happy with that individual response. If it is any sort of like potpourri, gym memberships, contractors, Walmart not removing the weight of the plastic bag used to measure your produce, not taking the tear off. That's a big issue, by the way, nickel and diming people. I definitely recommend sending people to their state AG. You just cannot beat those elected officials who really want their constituents to be happy and have excellent teams in place working each of those complaints. And then for any internet issue that's like, my internet's been broken, the speeds aren't appropriate, Comcast is giving me the runaround, whatever it is, or phone issue, the Federal Communications Commission's complaint system is spectacular. Again, it's much like the CFPB system. It goes very quickly. Portions of it are automated. People get a direct answer from the firm very, very quickly.
Incredible. That is such an incredible resource. I hope folks were taking notes. Again, we just posted that guide in the meeting chat here, and we will send it out to folks. I'm just curious if, as someone who's worked at both the FTC and the CFPB, so you talked a little bit about how the CFPB system was really set up kind of de novo, that you weren't having to redo legacy tech. And I'm just so struck by the fact that the way that you set up that process is really a lot of what we've been saying are best practices for casework across every agency. So I'm curious, just from your perspective, kind of it seems like there's a lot that's really only possible now with today's technology for how those issues are handled. Can you just reflect a little bit on the role of technology? How has tech transformed the way that agencies collect and process those complaints?
If I had a time machine and could have told myself in 2009 that an agency like the Bureau would now have more than 10 million complaints, and instead of the headlines being like, backlog leads to illegal foreclosure, like whatever, instead hearing story after story after story of people saying, like, I'm shocked that this fixed my issue that I thought was just going to be forever. It would have been hard to believe, because I think, people have totally fair assumptions about lots of government technology. Healthcare.gov broke, the VA had that horrible backlog. That is a totally normal thing for a person to be frustrated. Maybe they have a bad time at the DMV. But not only are agencies like the CFPB and the FCC and some AGs really able to use some of that modern technology to really prioritize their constituents and people who are having a hard time making ends meet, but it also lets us be more flexible when these emergent issues show up. The caseworkers on the call know that you often know what the constituents are worried about before it's even in the news, right? Like, people are calling and saying things. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't." And I think that it's a type of civic intelligence that I really hope a bunch of other agencies are able to catch up and avail themselves of as well. And I'll just say that the CFPB builds in the open. They have public service design patterns, has had an open source software policy since the beginning. So I do hope that there are pieces of the platform that others can avail themselves of. And I'll say that, I've talked to even people who work in consumer protection who didn't totally know that each complaint is often getting a response from the company at the CFPB. And when you're getting 10 million straight answers, that's a really powerful thing. And I think not enough people know. So I really am grateful for you all taking time to learn more about the system that's still running today.
Yeah, amazing. And I actually just want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, just to really make sure that we are crystal clear for folks on this call. Because I know there was a ton earlier this year, again, with all of the budget cuts and rifts and probation and what's going on. There was a lot of kind of open question marks about whether CFPB's Ledge liaison team was staffed, whether or not CFPB's portal for congressional inquiries was taking in responses, whether those responses were being worked. So just today, where we stand, again, you've mentioned it, but again, those
Yeah.
cases are moving, right?
Correct. So there's tons of headlines about things moving around. I've attended a bunch of the court hearings, and I'll say the judge, the Department of Justice, and the plaintiffs all agree that no matter how it shakes out, the consumer complaint database itself is congressionally mandated to be functioning. So they may try to make an argument that it should be elsewhere. They may try to make an argument it should be different shaped, but none of the parties involved are arguing to break this service. And I know, again, like the headlines, and in fact, it was broken early on, thanks to some of our Doge friends. And the administration later said, like, that wasn't the intent, and on and on. So, stuff happens, but this is a really resilient and flexible complaint system that everybody on the phone, all of your bosses created, and that we anticipate to exist until there's new legislation saying it should not.
Amazing. And again, just for highlighting like the things that we can learn from the way CFPB handles complaints that may be applicable to other agencies, it sounds like just adding flexible language in statute that says, hey, you should be responsive to this type of inquiry is one thing that we are seeing right now has worked. So that is definitely something that I hope folks take away here. I want to flag, we have plenty of time. I know folks have questions, and also like I just want to hear in the Q&A like your craziest consumer protection case inquiries. Like if you have handled Roblox money, like I want to hear about it. I want to know about it. I want to know everything about it. So please, 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 folks, just be dropping stuff in the Q&A. Anything we can do to be helpful. How can we pick Erie's brain on just where should these particular weird cases go? All is fair game. So wonderful. I'm just curious, Erie, you've talked about a couple of like little pieces here, but just maybe thinking in particular about a new office. If you are a brand new congressional office, you're just trying to wrap your head around basic casework, and now also you've got Roblox money cases coming in. Like, where do you start to just learn this vast network of agencies? How do you get up to speed? What's your advice?
My advice, if you're starting from nothing and you're like trying to buy chairs and have an office that works, is always to start with your state attorney general. Those people know the constituents inside and out. They know, what things are emerging, what things people are really worried about. They also know all of the federal regulators and how they can help. So you don't necessarily need to remember that a credit reporting complaint goes to the CFPB, because if you go to any of the 56 state attorney general's offices, they will send you back to the CFPB for help. So I think that when in doubt, start with your state AG. One thing I forgot to mention when I was doing my highlights of like where to send people is that every state has either a state insurance commissioner or an equivalent. They also do individual complaint mediation and are, again, excellent. So if you have people calling to complain about United Health or whatever, I love a state insurance commissioner, and their complaint systems are excellent.
Nice. And that is a really good flag, in particular for those private healthcare companies. I know those are always a tough spot for caseworkers used to working with Medicare, Medicaid. So really good flag. We have a question in the chat, and I know this comes up all the time. It's such a good question. Is it better for a constituent to submit consumer complaints directly to CFPB or to go through Congress? Is that treated differently? What's the most efficient way to do that?
So I would say it breaks even, but I would say it is probably faster, and you're right that you would get more details if they file it directly. However, if somebody's on the phone with you and you think they might give up, it's always really great to do it through your system while you have them in a warm connection. Um, Another benefit is that our agency, during both of my tours there, very carefully monitored our congressionally routed complaints to ensure that folks were getting the kind of treatment they should get. Now, they're in the same complaint system, but people are looking specifically at the congressional review dashboard. So if you have a really sticky problem you're worried might linger, sometimes it is great to have just your eyes on it as it goes through as well.
Got it. And that is a perfect transition to Whitney's question. Again, we always talk in these webinars about kind of Congress as the escalatory option, as you said, to get that extra pair of eyes on it. So Whitney asks, can you speak in more detail about what happens when a constituent gets a response from the company but disagrees with the response and needs further help? Sounds like there's some experience here that there needs some additional follow-up. There aren't as many options for follow-up once that initial response comes in. Any thoughts for Whitney?
Yeah. I'm going to say this in a classy way, which is if Congress wants us to build a process to run each of these down and like adjudicate each part of a claim for the 10 million complaints, I think the Bureau might be very happy to do it. Our read of the authority that we had included that chance for feedback. And for example, the types of things we get in the feedback section and why we designed it like that is if we're excuse me, working on a complaint about a debt collector and the debt collector contacts the consumer and says, I'm physically threatens them, we want to capture that. If a consumer is mad about a large number of things, the company fixes one or two and simply disagrees on the rest of them, the Bureau is not, the civic intelligence is the complaints. The rest of the Bureau is what addresses the larger market-wide failures or challenges. I won't speak to the functioning of that part of it right now in these conditions, but that's really that idea. Because if, to your point, Whitney, if it's not just a misunderstanding, if it's not like a missing fee, if there is like a real, like a company has decided to do business in a way that a consumer thinks is like fundamentally inappropriate, it may take a crackdown on, credit card add-on products in a policy way, like the Bureau did at a series of firms. It might take a case like the one that was against Capital One, where we had folks, we alleged that Capital One took about $2 billion from people by sending them into a certain type of savings account as opposed to the high yield one they thought they were entering. So complaint resolution isn't the only tool. And you're right, sometimes with complicated complaints or firms that have made a business decision that, as like an American patriot, I would like them not to make, it cannot get completely closed out in that thread. But it is a steam valve if something is really wrong for us to take a look at, and I think is an important part of the process. But again, like if there are other models at other consumer protection agencies or other authority that you think could be activated to go further, I don't think the consumer complaint team there would be mad about hearing about it.
Awesome. Yeah, that is really good advice. And Whitney, a really wonderful question. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that one. I'm going to take moderator prerogative and ask what's probably a dumb question here. For if someone is in Whitney's position, they're working with constituent, they got a response back that they don't love. It sounds like each of these kind of different groups that we've talked about here, state insurance commissions, state AG, CFPB, FCC, they each have their own individual jurisdiction. So there is no kind of escalatory hierarchy that one is overseeing any of the others. Is that right?
As far as I know, I'm just to clear, I'm not a lawyer, but
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
So, like, I love state insurance commissioners because they have that complaint intelligence. So when I'm trying to figure out what's going on with AI, like, those are the guys I call, because so much of AI is sort of like slapped on the side of health or insurance projects first, which is scary. But we don't have direct oversight of those bodies. They're just sort of fellow travelers who are also doing this kind of work.
Okay, super helpful. Thank you for the dumb question. Again, I wish I had
What's
these
up?
resources when I was a caseworker.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Luke, I feel like there's some backstory here. Again, I want to know all of it, but Luke asks, we are seeing an uptake in romance scams. Do you have thoughts or guidance on how to support constituents in this situation? Oh, these poor people.
No, it is totally brutal, and it's only getting worse. I'm going to tell you 3 short stories about this and my answer on what to do. One story is when I was at the Federal Trade Commission, we had a case against Match Group. Match Group owns Match.com and about 70% of the dating market. So people are like, "Oh, I'm not Match, I'm Hinge," or "I'm not Hinge, I'm," and it's all Match Group in a trench coat, right? Like, it's all the same company. Anyways, the lawsuit alleged that the Federal Trade Commission discovered that when a suspected romance scammer sent a message to someone, so I'm a romance scammer, I say, Anne, you're so compelling, I really want to meet you. Match.com would say, you know what, Erie's IP address looks weird. The text of the message looks weird. There are these, 3, 4, and 5 indicators that Erie might be a romance scammer. So we're actually not going to deliver the message to Anne because she is a paid subscriber to Match.com. Now, Dana hasn't yet upgraded her account to paid, and we just can't get her to upgrade her account to paid. If Erie sends a message to Dana, and even if we have already flagged Erie as somebody who should not be sent to Anne, we do send the message to Dana, and we say, for a small monthly charge, you can read Erie's message, upgrade now. And one of the things that is really concerning to me is that Match.com is not a fly-by-night platform. Match Group is how people are being targeted for genuine romantic connections. Match Group also has competitors in places like Facebook, places like other, platforms where people are connecting romantically. I am extremely concerned that platforms are knowingly sending fraudulent messages to induce users either to sign up for platforms, to sign up for paid accounts on platforms, or other things to increase metrics that would entice investors or other financial metrics that they're working on. So I just want to underscore that I think the explosion of romance scams is not an accident. And I'm extremely concerned, not just about the financial scale of harm that is truly extraordinary, but also that Fortune 500 companies are alleged to be making these financial decisions on purpose such that seniors, people that we love, are targeted in just totally vicious and brutal ways.
I wonder how much AI is contributing to these kinds of
That's my
scams
next
too.
point. That's my next point. I literally immediately before this session started, let me see if I have it open. Yep, I do. I was reading an academic paper about the use of AI in, I don't know if I can message everyone. I'll send it to the host and panelists, and maybe Anne can send it. An academic paper about how AI is really supercharging things like romance scams and text scams. And how it works is maybe my English isn't perfect. Maybe I haven't read every marketing book about how to charm people. They are at their fingertips able to get the same tools everybody else is to use AI to draft incredibly enticing messages that draw people in. And it's, again, it's targeting people who really deserve better from regulators who could stem this at the at the at the beginning, rather than, you know, trying so hard with this audience that's like trying to find love. Like, you know, if by the way, I know Dana's happily married to her husband, who I know and love, so it's okay for me to use her as this example. But like, you know, what matches Dana against a company that owns 70% of the dating market? You know what I mean? Like, it's just so. This was sort of a rant, but to your question, my advice for constituents are that they should file a complaint against the platform where they were approached by the romance scammer. So if they were originally on Match, if they were originally on Bumble, if they were originally on whatever, when they got a message and then they got a follow-up WhatsApp message, they should file a complaint with their state AG against the platform where that contact was made. And they should say, you know, was this person flagged as being fraudulent before they contacted me? And that's part of the facts of the Match Group case, is like, Match wasn't like, oh, we didn't, like, it was, I was already flagged. They already knew. So I think that there's a lot more of this happening with platforms. And again, bipartisan state attorneys general, whether it's Ken Paxton in Texas or Letitia James in New York, they are really looking closely at how platforms are exploiting, whether it's whether it's children or seniors, and are willing to take pretty strong action on behalf of their constituents. So I would really strongly direct you to send your constituents to file a consumer complaint with their AG about the platform.
Incredible. Like, guys, you came for the background of how CFPB works, and we also just got a masterclass in like how romance scams works and how they're being impacted by AI. Incredible. Erie, thank you for that. I have two follow-up questions. One is definitely not in your remit, but you've been in this world for so long, I'm going to ask it anyway, which is, so the one romance scam that I remember as a caseworker was one of these super heartbreakers where the older gentleman did not realize he was being scammed. And it was so apparent to everyone else in contact with him, everyone in my office, everyone in his family. Do you have any advice for caseworkers who think that their constituents are being scammed, but the constituent may not have come to that conclusion yet? Again, this is so far out of your remit, but I'm just
No. So I'm obsessed with this issue. They think the medical term is special interest. So I have read a lot of stories from both in consumer complaint context and also just like online of really desperate families, bank tellers, people who run the checkout at Walmart when watching people buy, you know, gift cards that they're like, ah, like, what do you do? And I think there's a couple of things that are effective patterns, and none of these solve everything. One is being with that person in person. So maybe if the person is calling the DC office, you can't say, you know, come on down to DC, but you might be able to say, you know what you're describing, I think we should talk more. Can you meet my colleague at our field office? That's an opportunity for them to sit next to another human. That might not always work, but that, especially with seniors, it makes a big difference if you can really sit down with someone. Number two is that whether it's a Fortune 500 company that has sent you a scammer on purpose, or anyone else, or the scammer themselves, they really want the victim to feel shame. So another really important pattern is not to treat the person like they're not that anyone on this call would, because I know how you guys work, not to treat them like they're dumb, not to treat them like they're bad, and in fact, to give them a chance to be the hero. And one way to do that is to say, is instead of saying like, you know, George Clooney is not texting you, Bertha, is instead to say, you know what? I keep hearing about other people getting targeted with stuff like this. Like, do you have any friends that have been through this? And give them a chance to reflect on people in their community that might have seen this, to have a little expertise to say, you know what, I did have a friend, like she thought she was dating, you know, uh, Brad Pitt and he was married or whatever, like some way to get them talking and in the driver's seat, and to say like, it's really tough if a powerful company or somebody who makes their money off of taking advantage of people is trying to make people embarrassed for falling for this. Well, I'll say this story. I used to work at Harvard and I worked at the Kennedy School. And during that time, I worked with a bunch of students who were really great. And one of the projects we were doing was talking to people to try to get them to work through the shame to file a consumer complaint. And I had a student who said, my dad has been targeted by a consumer or by a scammer, and you know, I don't think had like lost money, but had taken the bait and was starting down the road, and he never complained. And I really, if I can't get through to him, like how am I going to do this project? And I'm like, oh no, like is your dad like losing mental capacity? Like where is he in this? And she goes, oh, he's the dean of the Kennedy School. So like another thing I say is it happens to the best of us. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have, it doesn't matter how smart you are. They wouldn't use these approaches against us if they didn't work. You know what I mean? Like that this is a business to them, and it's not the fault of an individual who's trying to find love. It's not the fault of an individual who's just trying to get through their day. It's really a systemic failure, and these people being brave enough to speak out about it should really put them in a hero spot rather than in a victim spot. So those are the two patterns that I have. And I guess like the third mini one is I try really hard to talk about people who come forward as the heroes they are, because people are watching.
I love that. And what a nice like thing to keep in mind for just the attitude and in talking to constituents who come in with this stuff. It can be really easy to fall into that. Like, how could you fall for this? But that's a really nice reminder to just respect the dignity of folks who are absolutely being targeted by smart people.
Huge companies and smart people.
Huge companies and
AI,
smart people.
like
yeah. Just the terrible trifecta of like, how are you gonna do this? Incredible. So let me remind folks again, we have plenty of time for questions. So please drop your questions in the Q&A if there's anything else in particular you're looking for help with. Two things I wanted to ask about, and again, from my personal experience handling casework here, but also actually talking to CRS. So CRS said, so someone at CRS recently told me that one of the biggest areas of requests for support that they get is helping get information for private companies, contact info for private companies. When constituents reach out to CRS to say, I have a constituent who has an issue with United Airlines or Aetna Healthcare or whatever, and the caseworker's first instinct, again, not every office does this, but caseworker's first instinct is just to take that to the company. So are there ever places, can you kind of think about places where, sure, this involves a private company, but it's out of CFPB's remit, go see if you can talk to Aetna, versus places where it's like, no, absolutely, this shouldn't go to the company, it should go to something like CFPB. I know it's going to be tough to come up with a blanket rule there, but just curious.
I'm
Let's
ready.
do it.
So we actually tell constituents for things like our issues, we always want them to try and resolve it with the company first. Like if your bank did something bad, like best chance to fix it is to tell them. That's gotten complicated with the chatbot support systems that the seniors in my life just simply will not use. I will barely use them. Like they're bad. So for the Federal Trade Commission, the CFPB, the FCC, we all say, If you're having trouble with a company, start there. However, if it is a scammer, if you are a whistleblower, if you're not sure if it's a scammer, it is really important to start sometimes with your local law enforcement if you're worried it's a scammer, or your state attorney general, again, will often know. And then if you're a whistleblower, being extremely careful about reporting it through secure systems and not, well, I won't go deep into what a person at a company that's doing something illegal should do. There's often internal processes to report them. No whistleblower I've ever met started by going to the SEC, so I'll just assume they've tried to resolve it through internal matters. But for traditional consumer complaints, people should start with the company, and we see that in the data that they all have. People don't want to contact the government for fun, at least my part of the government. So we asked what they had done to get to this point, and more than 95% have already tried really hard to solve it themselves.
Super helpful. Yeah. Ooh, excuse me. Super helpful perspective. And actually, Elise asked something maybe a little bit similar here. Elise asked if there's value in referring people to the Better Business Bureau. Any relationship there? Any insight into how they work?
Yeah. So companies care a little bit about what the BBB says. Like, they see it kind of like a Yelp rating or a Google rating. They don't have the legal authority to force the company to do anything. So I wouldn't, if the person has a ton of energy and wants like extra points, or a complaint with a government agency didn't work, absolutely. Excuse me, I find like the average consumer only has energy for one complaint. And if they only have energy for one, I like to send them to the government place because they do have those hooks. But absolutely, like if the consumer complaint doesn't fix it, if it's some other sort of, you're really mad and want to do a ton of things about it, absolutely send them to the BBB.
Awesome. Yeah. And that is also a really good point about the one complaint. So again, putting stuff in perspective for the folks coming into your office. Ooh, this is a good one. We have someone from someone anonymous who says, sorry to bring up a can of worms. We love cans of worms here. We get an enormous amount of constituent complaints from folks being hounded with robocalls and scam calls, fake loan car warranty calls, seniors getting dozens a day. They're not frustrated, not falling for the scams, but just clearly understand that they're scams, but super, super frustrated. Where is the best place to go from there?
So this is a can of worms, but it's an important can of worms. The Department of Justice had 3 cases against excuse me. I'm getting over COVID for the folks on the phone. Sorry. The Department of Justice had 3 big cases against data brokers. And in those data broker cases, they found that the data brokers were packaging and selling segments to known scammers of seniors, people believed to have diminished capacity, and people who had Alzheimer's. Not only were they making segments of those people and handing them to the scam text people, but they were also using them to build lookalike audiences. So if they know I'm living in in a retirement village, and they know that I'm over 70 or something, they are saying, like a bunch of people have the same geographic pattern. We're going to put them in the bucket too. Then they were finding that the data brokers were using AI to algorithmically retarget those who engaged in the scam in any way. So for example, I'm in the retirement home, I'm getting all these scam texts. I text back one day, shut up or something. I am immediately put on a list as a live person who is reading the messages that are being sent, and I'm signed up for infinitely more messages of a similar kind. And the people like me are also then going to get more of those messages. Several things you can do. One is apparently this is not fair because this is only accessible to rich people, but the brand new iPhone update apparently has some really good features on blocking unknown calls and text messages. I think Android has some native capability already to do that. I will say that the explosion of these messages, again, I'm actually publishing something on this with Georgetown in the next like week or two. I'll send it to you, Anna. Maybe you can put it back in. But this is all being fueled by legitimate AI companies that are making it a lot easier. So, for example, instead of someone writing those messages to your dad, what they're doing is getting a profile, not like his photo and information, but like, he roots for the Buffalo Bills, he lives in this area, he's got a couple of kids, he's in this age bracket, set, draft messages to send. And it is essentially free because of these AI tools to produce a huge volume of messages. The other way it's happening are a ton of the data breaches that even the largest companies in the world have fueled. I don't know if I can share my screen. Oh, you've disabled. If you feel like enabling, I'll show you a terrifying fact. All right, I'm going to share my screen. So it is, have I been pwned?
Oh,
Can you see the screen I'm sharing?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, no. Great.
So, and the reason I'm saying what I'm about to say is that it's to prove that there's nothing an individual person can do to stop the data breaches because of the companies in question doing this. So this is my email address. And again, I have been in consumer protection for more than a decade, recognized expert. Here are the number of breaches that I have been involved in. These are not things where I, didn't change my password. This isn't an Erie problem. It is 29 businesses that I did business with lost my information. So, from AT&T, from LinkedIn, from Park Mobile, which I have to use to park in DC, and you do too, from Twitter, from Gravatar, I don't even remember that company, Havenly, the House Design, and on and on and on, Canva, all of these platforms. Point being that the people who are being inundated with these scam messages, it is because data brokers are making money from selling this information, because scammers are making money from exploiting people, and it's because legitimate companies are sloppy with our information because it doesn't make them more money. As a federal regulator at the CFPB and at the Federal Trade Commission, we worked really hard to crack down on sloppy security from firms that should know better, because otherwise there's really no way to stem the tide. And again, you're right, even if it's amazing your dad's not falling for them, and it's polluting what should be a resource he can use to stay in contact and get help and be part of his community. I think it's like if there was horrific traffic on every street, but every car is a scammer. I think it's really destructive to American society, especially when isolation can be so tough.
Incredible. Erie, this has been absolutely wild and also just fascinating. Thank you for joining us and not only sharing your CFPB background, all of the consumer protection support, but also just a little bit of a behind the curtain insight into the absolutely diabolical world for how people target everyone's constituents. So thank you. We really appreciate your generosity with your time and insight. And I see you posted your email here, which I will route over to everybody in the chat.
Please. And I just saw a really good question about crypto ATMs, and I have an answer for you. So if you ask me that question, please email me and I will get you the information.
Wonderful. Dana, let me turn it over to you for just any final thoughts.
Well, first of all, I thank you, Anne, for creating this series. Thank you to everybody attending today for your excellent questions, for your time and attention and presence, and the work that you do every single day. And thank you so much, Erie, for doing this. Really appreciate it. I owe you. To close, I just want to say to folks listening in, on all of these things, try the service yourself. Go as far as you can without doing something that you shouldn't. But you probably have complaints of your own, like hidden fees on a credit card, anyone? Um, tell your constituents to document everything and keep track of interactions they've had with companies with the service. And as Erie mentioned, while you want to send people directly to the company, if possible, to resolve the issue, most federal agencies will put a priority on inquiries from congressional folks. And so that's an escalation path. Don't be afraid to follow up. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you again to Anne and Erie.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.